So like I just said in the introduction, you can see a dimension as a tag that you assign to entries before posting them. That tag could be, for example, a customer group or a region or a product group, whatever. So let's have a look at how dimensions look like in Microsoft Dynamics NAV, but first at the main features. So dimensions in NAV, like I just said, it's basically adding data to entries before posting. And this means that by adding this data, you can group posted entries for analysis purposes. So for example, every sales that I've done in Europe, or every purchase of an expense that we have done for the administration department. You see, so this is typically something that we can use dimensions for. Now, we will start with creating the dimension itself, so the type of information that you want to add to an entry, and we will look at the examples of Kronos, but already named some examples like customer group, cost center, product group, and so on. And each dimension can then have a number of dimension values. And these are one of the possible values for a particular dimension. So for example, customer group for Kronos, it's large, small, medium, and so on. Region could be Europe, could be different countries. So that's typically what we mean with dimension values. So let's have a look in the application. So here, if I use the search function to search for dimensions, you can see the dimensions that Kronos has set up. So I can see area, business group, customer group, and so on. So here you can see a number of dimensions, to be more specific, 8 different dimensions. And that brings us to the first question: how many dimensions can we set up in NAV? Well, the answer is very simple: an unlimited number of dimensions. So there's no limitation on the number of dimensions that you can use. Kronos is using 8 dimensions, which in general is already quite a lot, but you can perfectly use 10 dimensions, 15, 20, 30, 100, as much as you want. You can also use 1 dimension, or you don't even have to use dimensions. So from that point of view, it's a very flexible feature in NAV that, first of all, is not mandatory, and if you start using it, you can define yourself how you want to use it, how many dimensions, and so on. Of course, take into account the more dimensions that you use, the more complex and the more error-prone your daily use of the system will become. I will show you this with an example after we have discussed the dimensions, and then we will also look at some setup features that can facilitate, that can make the use of dimensions as efficient as possible in the daily use of the system. But first, we need to look at the dimension itself. So we have area, business group, customer group, and so on. So let's pick customer group as an example. So we can create dimensions by entering a code, a name. There's the code caption, the filter caption, and a description. Most of these fields, like code caption and filter captions, are entered automatically. So it's very easy from that point of view to enter dimensions, and then once that we have a dimension, we can start entering dimension values. Because if I say, okay, we have a customer group dimension, what are customer groups? So maybe for one company, they would like to make the difference between private and government. Another company would like to make the difference between, for example, large, small, medium, and so on. So each company can define themselves what they mean with a specific dimension that they create. A very good example is also area. So for some companies, areas might be the different continents in the world, like the US, Europe, Asia. And for another company, it might be cities within one country if they have, for example, a local business. You see, so that's what we need to specify by creating dimension values. So if I select customer group and if I click on dimension values, so these are my current customer groups, but it's very easy to create a new one. So suppose that we start selling more and more to governments, then I can just enter a new government. There we go, a new customer group, and we can start using it. You see, so no complicated setup that we need to do, very easy to set up. So from that point of view, again, it's very flexible. Now what you see here is one way of specifying your dimension values, and what you see is that Cronus has only standard dimension values in this case. But you can also apply more structure to the dimension values. And as an example, I will go to area. And if I now click on dimension values, you will see that this is a little bit more structured. So Cronus is using here begin total and end total dimensions, which is very similar to what you can do with a chart of accounts, for example, in NAV. And this will allow me to create a structure. You can see that these dimensions are indented and use totaling formulas. So they're grouping, for example, all the Europe areas, all the American areas, and so on. And again, they're creating total formulas, which means that afterwards, if I run a report, I can run it with this same structure, and I immediately have the totals available. So it could be very interesting. Of course, then your codes will be a little bit more generic, like numbers in this case, and I will name my dimensions here. So we can see begin total, end total, and so on. So let's have a look at the different types that we can use. So we have standard. Now, standard is something that you use, for example, for a title. So in standard, you will now, for dimension values to which you want to post. Not the title is heading. So again, standard is what you use to post on. So for example, Europe North EU is a standard dimension. So then you have heading. This is what you use for a title. So if you just want to start with the title, you can use heading. Then we have total, begin total, and end total. Now what is the difference? Total is just a plain total. So I could enter here at the bottom, like for example 100 total areas. I can enter here, then this is a total dimension, and I could say, okay, take everything from 10 to 85. That's a typical example of a total. Yeah? Begin total and end total are used together, and everything between a begin and an end total, first of all, is indented by using here the indent dimension values function. And at the same time, the system will also enter the totaling formula. You see, so you can use begin total and end total to group a number of lines. That's basically what you see here. And that's why we also have this specific structure, as you can see. So could also be very interesting. Take into account that if we look at all the dimension values to which you can post, of course we can post to standard dimension values. That's quite obvious. But you can also post to begin total dimension values. So if I sell to a customer, for example, I could also say that we have sold to Europe North or Europe, because begin total is also allowed to post to. So these are two different ways that we can set up dimension values. So the structured way and the unstructured way, as I sometimes call it. So we had customer group as an example. So once that you know the dimensions and the dimension values that you want to use, setting up these dimensions in Microsoft Dynamics NAV is quite easy. And that's something that you can experience by yourself by going to the practice of this lesson.